It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. Of course, we continue to focus on the final journey of former President Muhammadu Buhari, as President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will today, Tuesday, lead a high-level federal government delegation to the burial ceremony of the late Nigerian leader and is expected to receive the remains of the deceased former president of Nigeria at the Katsina airport later in the day. The committee, according to a statement by the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, is to be chaired by Secretary to the Government of the Federation himself, Senator George Akume. The Interministerial Committee is tasked with the responsibility of planning and coordinating a befitting state burial for the late elder statesman today. It has as members the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy and his counterparts from the Ministries of Budget and Economic Planning, Defense, Information and National Orientation, Works, Interior, FCT, Housing and Urban Development, Health and Social Welfare and Art, Culture and Creative Economy. Other members of the committee included the National Security Advisor, Special Advisor to the President on Policy and Coordination, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Political and Other Matters, the Inspector General of Police, the Director General Department of State Services, and the Chief of Defense Staff. Meanwhile, in London, Vice President Kashim Shettima led a federal government delegation to pay a condolence visit to the family of former President Buhari. The official delegation includes the Chief of Staff, Femi Gbajabiamila, Borno State Governor Babagana Zulum, Foreign Affairs Minister Yusuf Tugar, and Deputy Chief of Staff, Senator Ibrahim Hadejia. The team met with former First Lady Aisha Buhari, surrounded by family and close associates. The federal government delegation also visited the president's nephew, Maman Daura, who is said to be recuperating at a London hospital.
It's not a loss to the family alone, but to the entire nation. And the president was personally grieved, was personally touched. He said he's one of us. That was the exact word he used. May Allah grant the soul of our patriarch, of our father, eternal rest, and reward him with his Al-Jannah Firdaus. And may Allah also give the family, the government and people of the Federal Republic of Nigeria the fortitude to bear the irreparable loss. It was an institution. He has sought the lives of each and every one of us here. Words cannot adequately capture the depth of our grief. But inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Once again, on behalf of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, please accept our heartfelt condolences.
Well, the tributes continue to pour in from across the world on the death of former President Muhammadu Buhari. In posts on X, world leaders described Buhari as a towering African statesman and a committed anti-corruption crusader. The American Embassy in Nigeria described the former president as a leader defined by service and discipline and acknowledged Buhari's contribution to the nation's democratic development. The Chinese Embassy, in a statement on X, said, "We mourn a resolute leader whose unwavering dedication to Nigeria's unity and progress will leave an enduring legacy." From India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi recalled Buhari's warmth and commitment to strengthening Nigeria-India ties. He said India's 1.4 billion people join in mourning a statesman and a friend. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa expressed deep condolences to the Nigerian government and people, calling Buhari's death a loss to the entire continent. Kenya's President William Ruto praised Buhari's legacy, describing him as a leader who championed anti-corruption reforms, regional security, and Africa's economic integration. He said Buhari's impact went beyond Nigeria and resonated across Africa. And Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye called Buhari a major figure in Nigerian and African political life and extended condolences to President Tinubu and the Nigerian people. Also, former President Goodluck Jonathan and former Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo have visited Vice President Kashim Shettima and the federal government delegation in London as they signed the condolence register and paid glowing tributes to the late former president. Now, the former military president of Nigeria, General Ibrahim Babangida, also sent in tributes to mourn Nigeria's former president, Muhammadu Buhari. Babangida describes Buhari as a friend, brother, coursemate, and a fellow soldier in the journey of nationhood. He says their paths crossed in 1962 when they both joined the Nigerian Military Training College in Kaduna, and their bond was forged not only by military training, but by a shared commitment to the ideals of service, discipline, and love for country. IBB says Buhari's passing is not just the loss of a former head of state or a two-term civilian president, but is the loss of a symbol and a man whose life embodied the transition of Nigeria from the old guard to the new republic. Excuse me. Now, fresh facts emerged yesterday as to how the late former Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari spent his last hours on earth, with one of his confidants and close nephews, Maman Daura, and other family members telling This Day what transpired in his last moments on earth. Daura stated that he was with the late Nigerian leader on Saturday and that plans were already being made to ensure Buhari's discharge later this week before his condition suddenly changed around 2 p.m. on Sunday. Other family members who spoke in the same vein confirmed this narrative, stressing that there was no noticeable sign that the former president would not survive the latest round of this ailment, which he eventually succumbed to. According to the former newspaper editor, arrangements were already being made to ensure that the hotel bills of those who were in London for the sake of supporting Buhari were sorted out before the president's formal discharge from the hospital later this week. He stated that he left Buhari's bedside and that Buhari himself was in high spirits on Saturday before he left him, with the hope that he, Daura, will return on Sunday to see him. However, Buhari's health was said to have worsened on Sunday while taking breakfast, with breathing problems kicking in around midday of that day, and doctors on duty battling to help him stay alive before his eventual passage around 4:30 p.m. of that same day. All right, so we now have a detailed account of what transpired, as well as, of course, world leaders coming together to mourn and to stand in solidarity with Nigeria as we prepare for a state funeral today that President Tinubu seems to be ensuring that no detail is left uncovered, that all aspects are well taken care of, and he is given a befitting send-off.
Yes, I think it's all of this are markers of the immense respect that the current president, but of course many people across Nigeria, and as we've seen from all of the tributes from different world leaders, it's a testament to the impact and the level of respect, as I said, that all of these people have for the dearly departed Muhammadu Buhari. You know, it was just yesterday during the show we were able to listen and see how some members of his family immediately reacted to the news of his passing. And just with the screams that we heard, it just underscores the pain that many people are going through right now. And I think that whatever side of the spectrum anybody is when it comes to looking at who Muhammadu Buhari was as a president, no matter how checkered his history may be, this is someone who was still very important to many people. A father, a husband, a grandfather. So you can imagine that at this time, there is so much despair going around that family, going around the country, and going around the world. I do believe that it is with ample mutual respect that these world leaders, the likes of William Ruto of Kenya, Faye in Senegal, and of course Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, extending their condolences, show that during President Muhammadu Buhari's tenure, he was a president that did seek to stretch his hands not only across Nigeria, but across the African continent and indeed the world. And when people come out and issue these statements and these tributes, they're not just words on paper. There are reflections of people's true relationships with the people who have unfortunately left us. So that is definitely something that needs to be underscored. Clearly, this is another example of how much of an impact President Muhammadu Buhari had on people around the world. We are, of course, going to be covering his funeral procession, and we do have ample reporters on ground in Katsina State as we await the arrival of his remains to Nigeria and, of course, the onward journey to his home state and hometown. And we will continue to see the preparations being put in place by, of course, our current president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who's gone to great lengths to ensure that President Buhari has a fitting burial. You know, it's such a difficult situation because, as we know, when anyone dies, of course, that is something that's going to be felt by those closest to him. But when a president dies, when a president leaves this world, it does reignite conversations, of course, about their tenure, about their leadership, about who they were as personal entities and who they were to the people that they were sworn to protect, who they were to lead. And I do think, you know, when you look at the spectrum of reactions, there is always going to be differences. People who agree with the lion's share of his decisions, of his policies, people who disagree, people who may not feel as though his decisions were for the betterment entirely of Nigeria, especially looking at the economy and some domestic issues. But then, as we were discussing yesterday, we were looking at former President Muhammadu Buhari's foreign policy and the positioning of Nigerians in different global spaces, in different important positions. I do think that part of his legacy does show and is continuing to show in how we see many Nigerians continue to do great things outside of the country. So, as always, I'm thinking we have our reporter in Katsina who is ready to speak to us and give us an update. I don't know if that is Nisi. Yeah. Is it Nisi?
No. As Nigeria continues to mourn the former President Buhari, we now go to Daura in Katsina State to speak to our correspondent, Ayodele Adenaye. Ayodele, if you can hear us, good morning. Can you give us an update of the developments? Yesterday, we saw military preparing for the arrival of the body. What's the status of things in Daura?
All right. Good morning to you over there and the entire team in Lagos. It's a pleasant morning here in Daura, an ancient town in Katsina State, the hometown of the late former President Muhammadu Buhari. Like you pointed out, seeing the military yesterday making preparation, it has not also changed here. You know, yesterday, everybody from all indication thought the burial was going to take place yesterday, not until the state governor, Rada Diku, announced that the burial will now take place on Tuesday at about 2 p.m. And so with that, a lot of dignitaries who came into Daura yesterday, some of them or most of them have to return back to Katsina State to go and welcome, to go and receive the body of the former president. But presently here, where I'm standing, is where the funeral is expected to take place later in the day. And just a few meters away from here is the house of the former president, just by my right-hand side. And the chopper that will be conveying his remains, according to what we have gathered so far, will be landing at the helipad just by my left-hand side, while the funeral prayer is going to take place in this very location where I am standing. And from what we have seen so far, the preparation are already on top gear. The people working to see that the guests that will be coming here feel more comfortable are putting everything in place, the poles for the trampolines and everything are getting set. But access to this place, just like you pointed on the issue of military, is very, very difficult. So I think only those who probably will be coming with the body from Katsina will be allowed into this particular place, because the entire area, the entire street, the entire town to some extent is already barricaded. But like you know, today is also a public holiday in Katsina, and not just in Katsina, in Nigeria as a whole. And in Daura town, it is a very quiet situation for them. And a lot of people are in a state of mourning. And some of them still think it's a dream. And they wish that their leader, who to them have contributed immense or has done a lot in this particular community, can just come back to life to continue the good work that he has been doing. But everything is on top gear to ensure that the funeral takes place. Also, the governor of the state was also here yesterday to see where the former president will be buried. And from what we have seen, it seems he will be buried inside his residence. Like I said, it's just a few meters away from where I'm standing. And the grave have also been dug yesterday, and they are just waiting for the body to arrive today and for the funeral prayer to be held, and they proceed for the burial.
Okay, Ayo, and good to see you again, Ayo Adenaye. The question I'd like to ask is, can we pan round, probably to see the state of things? Because when you said, it's just there, he'll be landing, the camera didn't probably pan round, or are there any security difficulties as regards panning around and probably pan round, to the president? Because viewers at home would like to see the president's home where his remains will be, So if you can just take us around, let's pan around, let's have a feel, not just one background, as it were. And secondly, have you been talking to some of the villagers, the people in Daura, for instance, what's been the expression of grief like and all of that? But just walk around with the camera. Let's see, let's see, not just one background, Okay. This television, yeah. Thanks.
All right. Okay, so let me take us around the place.
Yes.
As we can see, just by my left, the camera can just pan to the left, and so that you see where the helipad is, where the chopper is expected to land. This particular place where I'm pointing is where the chopper is expected to land at this particular location. And just behind me there, you can see a lot of security personnel there, trying to ensure everything is in top gear. And down there also you can see some flags, and all the flags there, in accordance to the president's directive, all the flags there, they are all in half-mast. As you can just see the flag from a distance from here. But you can see all the army, all security agencies are all here to ensure that there is no breakdown of law and order and to maintain decorum, especially for the people of the community. And earlier today, like you asked, we were in the street, not really to interview some of them, but just to get what to eat. And while they observed that from our look, we looked like strangers, and they were like, okay, why are we in this town? We say, this is why we are here. And, they begin to tell us that, because to them, in fact, where we slept for the past 3 days, based on what the people of the community told us, that there have been uninterrupted power supply in this particular community. All the roads in this particular town are all tarred. And the woman in particularly was telling us that, well, it is now the people of this community will understand truly that they have lost somebody. That anytime, with his presence and with his, with his pedigree in this town, they enjoyed a lot of things, free water, uninterrupted power supply. They have a very, very good road. So the loss of former president to the people of this town, it is indeed a great loss, and they knew that it's going to have an adverse effect on them, especially in some of the things, like I said, that they enjoy freely, hospital, water, good roads, and a whole lot of things.
Ayo, is that where you are? Is it a road or is it a field where the prayers will be held? Because I wanted you to also pan around to this corner so that we see the other end of the field, pan around to the other side, let's see the other end of the field so that people can have a, full understanding of what is going to be. So, very good. If you can pan down, yes, let's see. So is that the home of President Muhammadu Buhari? Is that the home down there with trees over there where he's going to be buried? I mean, you can just take us around, yeah.
All right, that is not his home. Where you saw this white place is not his home. His home is off of this particular fence where I am. The location has 2 helipads. Sometimes based on what we gather, the president can enter land. The camera can just take this particular location. This right-hand camera, can we just go here? The president can enter land above this particular fence. There is an helipad there, or he lands on this particular side on my left-hand side. So, but this particular house is not his own. His own house is just very, very close to the helipad, the other side of the helipad. But yesterday we had our live feed from his house yesterday. Where we are now, it will be very difficult for us to move over to his house, because when we leave here, it will be difficult for us again to gain access to this particular location where we find ourselves. But this is a big field, and from what we've gathered, it should be enough to contain all the guests that will be coming for the funeral. And immediately after the funeral, they proceed to his residence where the burial is going to take place. And like I said, every preparation for the burial, where he will be placed in, has already been done yesterday, and the governor was here to monitor it to ensure that it is a very good place for the former president.
I'm just curious. I know you may not have been in Katsina to cover it at the time, But this is the second time that we're seeing the burial of a president in Katsina State. Are there any notable differences? I know, the late President Yaradua was not from Daura. He was from a different part of Katsina. But are you seeing any similarities just in the sentiment and just how people are receiving, another one of another great Katsina statesman who has died?
All right. Well, I will agree to the fact that for the people of Katsina, I may not practically say that Yaradua did not play a significant role, but a lot of people in Katsina, not just in Katsina, let me say in northern part of the country, in quote, they see former President Muhammadu Buhari like what people will refer to as a demigod or like a god. And that is why once he speaks, a lot of people wants to follow. They regard him as Megaskia. And what does Megaskia mean? Megaskia means somebody that always speaks the truth. And in fact, we are told when we in Kano, in Katsina, in some part of the state, and the part of some northwest state, that if Buhari had not become the president of this country and he died without becoming the president of this country, that some people will have gone to his grave and say, oh, this is the president that Nigeria never had. And to show you how much love the people of Kano, the people of Katsina, the people of Niger, Jigawa, and any part of the north that you can think about have for late President Muhammadu Buhari. So I think he commands a lot of respect, especially in Katsina and in the whole lot of northern Nigeria. Not also in Katsina, in Kano, where I've lived for so many years. I know when Buhari is coming to Kano, either for campaign or for a visit, I know how the turnout is always be. So it's somebody that has a lot of respect. He commands a lot of respect in Katsina and in the lot of Northwest. So, but I'm not ruling out Yaradua, but I think the influence of Buhari, to some extent, supersedes that of Yaradua in Katsina and that of northern Nigeria. Yaradua never stayed long on the throne, so we might practically not be able to judge by that.
All right. I'd like to say thank you, Ayo Adnaye, for your very in-depth reporting and just giving us a view of what is happening there in Daura. Definitely we'll still come back to you. There's a lot that we'll be seeing today from you. And good job. Thank you so much. And good job being part of history today. I mean, pretty much it speaks for itself. See, the truth is, like I was saying yesterday, there are two sides of a coin. There are two sides a man will be judged. But the most important thing in life is, at least when your critics are going to judge you, let most of the things they will say about you be lies. I'm sure you got that part. But the sad thing about Buhari's legacy, President Buhari's legacy, is the fact that most of what the critics say are not lies. You know, people will not like you based on what you represent, so they will say many things out of sentiments. But people will like you and they'll say things in your favor. He's got his good side and his bad side. But the things his critics say are not lies.
Such as?
Oh, number one, role played in NSAS. It's not a lie. See, youths on the street kept on calling for the president to speak while NSAS was going on. He didn't see anything. It was the day after the killing he addressed Nigerians. And a lot of people felt that address was even underwhelming. That's not a lie. It's a fact. We treat them in a language they understand. Making reference to the Civil War was not a lie. That was why that tweet was reported and it was taken down and they went ahead to ban the platform. See, here, he has good sides though. He has good sides. With due respect, he has good sides.
Yeah.
What are his good sides? Yes. Provision of welfare system. Trader money, anchor borrowers, all those things. Yes, it was intended well, but it went south because of the management. The fact that, yes, we can help a lot of people through that means. It was intended well, but like I said, it went south. So the intention to even do it, the intention to set up the humanitarian ministry, the intention to even set up things like PEBEC, yes, it's commendable. But you see, in the grand scheme of things, when we are talking about don't speak ill of the dead, That's why people should do well when they are alive.
I mean, but the humanitarian ministry, that was set up, right?
Yes.
I believe it was Sadia Farouk who was the minister.
Yes, but we also know how the humanitarian ministry ended, Femi. It's a lot of talk about corruption. But the intention of doing it was a good one by President Buhari, because he largely campaigned based on the welfare of the people, which was a good one. You can see indicative of what people say in his village. He has a heart for his people. He did well in his own right. So when he set up that humanitarian ministry, it was to buffer against, and yes, some of the monies were being released to people, but how was the management like? I mean, there's still many cases here and there, allegations back and forth. But going back to the injunction of not speaking in for the dead paying tribute, it's a good thing to pay tribute. But the truth is, it is also when people go, people remember what was done, how they were hurt. So you see, according to the Nigerian, don't speak ill of the dead. Don't speak ill of the dead means that those that are alive should remember that when we die, it is the same scrutiny that will be visited upon us. And that's why we should pinch ourselves. Even Buhari himself knows that he might have done something wrong. I don't know if they can play that video where he said, I'm human. In the course of my life, I might have done some things wrong. People that have hurt should forgive me. He said it. It's caught on tape. He himself knows. So all of this is not to say the fact that we should not respect him and respect his service for the country. But it's also a reminder to those leaders that are alive today and what will be said of them. That's why when you go to the church or you go to the mosque, when somebody dies and the leader preaches a homily, it is for you to remember that one day your immortality is coming. So pinch yourself a bit and be very circumspect. And you have to even be double circumspect when God gives you the privilege of a leadership position. How many presidents have we had in Nigeria? Have we had up to 50 people adorn the position of president? No. In a country where you have over how many people? Over 200 million people. So it's a privilege, it's a rare elite category. The question is, so what now do you do with that power when it is not given to you? It's something you should pinch yourself and you should be because see, if you look through all the religious injunctions, God has a special judgment cadre for leaders because the accountability is double. So these are the things that we should look at strongly. And may God help us as we go through today. The memories of his good works will never be forgotten. Like I said yesterday, Buhari is a hero to many. But otherwise, when you mention Buhari to many, it leaves very sad memories. You will always be judged by what way. But at least do good so that many things that your critics will say about you, at least let them be lies. Because there's no how when you die, critics will not say evil things about you, but let them be lies. Let people say, okay, you said it because you just don't like this person. That's the formative word here.
All right, well, we continue in a mood of reflection. And I think for me, what has stood out is the fact that no human being is infallible. I think we have all made our mistakes and we have all taken a wrong turn. And various people will be impacted in different ways by the choices we make, especially when we are leaders. I remember where I was when I heard that Nelson Mandela had died. Why do I use the example of Nelson Mandela? Because Nelson Mandela is somebody who's regarded almost globally, on a global scale, as being somebody who was heroic and almost angelic in nature. But even then, when you speak to some people will tell you that Nelson Mandela was a sellout, that he sold out the cause of black African people in South Africa. The point here I'm making is that one man's hero, one man's freedom fighter will always be another man's terrorist. Terrorist used very loosely, of course, in this context. So The question is, when we're looking at legacy, what is it that we should focus on? Should we focus on the good intentions of a man, or should we focus on the consequences, whether they be positive or negative? And I think the jury will always be out on that, because depending on where you are when it comes to the impact that those choices, actions, and decisions made, some will lean towards the good intentions of a leader. Some will focus on the consequences of those actions. And everybody is entitled to feel the way they do, and everybody's sentiment towards those various things is valid. But one thing that's standing out to me with regards to the demise of President Muhammadu Buhari is the fact that there's a lot of healing that needs to happen across the nation. Many people feel that some sore points from Biafra have been raised up. Some hurts have resurfaced. Many people are looking at NSAS, and they're saying the hurts have resurfaced. When will they be resolved? Where will there be healing, justice, reconciliation? Over the years since the Fourth Republic began, we've had several panels and committees set up for the purposes of truth reconciliation. Oputa panel, which is probably the most widely reported, Uwais panel. We even had the NSAS panel, which fell under the tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari. But when you look at the tense conversation, the tense exchanges that are currently happening between people, it's a moment for us to be reminded that maybe we need to take a step back and see what to do, how we can bring everybody back to the table for Project Nigeria, because it seems that the divisions continue to be unearthed in deeper and more undignifying ways. The death of a former president is supposed to be a moment of unity, a moment of clarity. Because like I always say, patriotism is not about liking your president in the person, but it's about consistently respecting the office of the president, knowing that it doesn't represent an individual, but it represents nationhood. Some people have asked, oh, why is it a public holiday? And I say, whether or not you liked him, whether you think he did wrong or right, he was a democratically elected president of Nigeria, and he deserves nothing less than a day to honor him on his journey home, on his final journey home. It's important for us to be able to preserve the sanctity of these public offices. How do we do that? The work needs to be done. There's constitutional reviews being done. Conversations are being had in all different strata of society. And it's an ongoing project. But I think it's just a stark reminder that we need to return the sanctity, the reverence, the excitement, the respect, the adoration to the office of the president, whether or not you like him. That's the most important thing here. Buhari was elected by a majority. Well, some people might say that, well, elections in Nigeria are not necessarily the most transparent and free and fair. But you can see the outpouring of love. Just last week, you heard statements that were being released by, I believe it was Boss Mustafa, who was saying that, well, whatever happened in that election that eventually brought him to power, he had shown a consistent outing of 12 million votes in all the elections that he had participated in. It's the votes that were then added by the coalition that then sprung him to power. That's another debate, another conversations, because many would say that it was more than the votes. Many things were brought to the table in that particular election that brought him to power. But if you look at it objectively, 12 million votes is still more votes than was attained by the person who won the last election. Just to show you, when you're looking at it in numerical terms, in nominal terms, a big part of this country love and adore this man and willingly chose him as their president. Now, that's why I take the conversation back to nationhood, to healing, because it shouldn't be about different parts of the country. I know later on Adefemi is bringing a story about something that's happening in Southern Africa, and it made me go back to the history books to read about how the colonial masters cut and sliced and divided us and called us mega tribes and brought one tribe, or let me call it ethnicity, and put it together with another ethnicity and created all manner of confusion, which has left us in a state of animosity amongst brothers and sisters today in Africa. And it should not be so. Of course, solutions are going to be difficult to find. So many people, it's an ongoing process. But for me, a stark reminder that every single leader will have successes and will have failures. But that doesn't take away from the fact that that person still holds the highest office in Nigeria. So there are two responsibilities. There's the duty of the leader himself to ensure that in the execution of his duties, he preserves the sanctity of that office. To the people, in ensuring that in our electoral process, participation in civic society, that we hold that revered office to account, so that we start to move away from this place where we continue to feel subjected to a level of denigration by political offices and political office holders. Well, on that note, we now move to the next story, which is unfortunately continues in the sad theme of the week, as the Awujale of Ijebuland, Oba Sikiru Kayode Adetona, has been buried at his private residence in Ijebu-Ode, Ogun State. The revered monarch, who went to meet his ancestors at the age of 91, was interred on Monday afternoon, according to Islamic rites, in a solemn ceremony attended by dignitaries, including Ogun State Governor Prince Dapo Abiodun, Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, royal family members, and members of the Ijebu Traditional Council. Oba Adetona, who reigned for 65 years, is widely considered Nigeria's longest-serving traditional ruler, and as his death marks both the end of an era and the beginning of a new normal for Ijebuland.
Alhamdulillah, 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 alhamdulillah. There's not much to say. KBSC came into this world fully prepared, fight his good cause, and conquer. There's not much to say. He will be much more happier wherever he is. He didn't struggle, he didn't suffer. He just left peacefully.
KBC was a great man. You heard my speech. He was a man like very few. And God doesn't make them like that, many of them. He was very courageous. He was someone who was very forthright. He was a man of impeccable integrity and character. And he was someone who was very, he embraced his religion, Islam, but his level of religious tolerance was unparalleled. And that is why his reign has been so peaceful. He was a giver. He was a philanthropist. He believed in good governance. A KBC that went and established an institute of governance. I'm still to see any individual establish such an institution. I want to thank President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for all he has done for KBC, bestowing on him that national award of Grand Commander of the Order of Niger, adopting that institution and turning it into a branch of NIPS, and being true to friendship, because he's like a son to KBC.
Well, it means a lot because, KBC was my father, and I was really very close to him. I always drive down to come and visit him, and, that's the only thing that I think I can do to honor him. He was a great person, great leader, and also a unifier in Nigeria. So, it is upon us to all respect him, pay him the last respect, and we pray the Almighty God to bless his soul and give him Al-Jannah Firdaus.
Yeah, considering to the people, good people of the state, Baba was a legend. Baba was very courageous. Baba believed in the unity of the Yoruba race and Nigeria in particular. So my prayer is for God to give the family the fortitude to be able to bear the law.
But speaking specifically here in Ogun State, where the paramount ruler of Ijebuland, the Awujale himself, late Oba Sikiru Adetona, is just going to meet his ancestors, I think it's a big vacuum from various angles. A whole lot of us that are seated here were probably not even alive when he ascended that throne about 65 years ago. So he's had a record that I doubt if in modern day any other person could have kept that record. To have been on a throne of kingship for almost 65 years, I think it speaks a whole lot, to his person, to the dynasty, and to the people that he has tended over.
A day of mourning and reflection continues. Adefemi, I believe you were there in person yesterday. Just give us an account of
how it went.
Yes, it looked truly befitting.
Yes, definitely that. You know, when it comes to Islamic burials, it catches you unawares because the person dies and then immediately you go into the preparations for the burial that day or the morning after, depending on the time that person dies. So I say all of that to say that despite the very short notice, there was such a huge gathering of people at the Awujale's private residence on Igbeba Road. So it was just immediately after finishing my segment on the show yesterday that we made our journey down ourselves. And when we got there, immediately you were able to see the Ijebu traditional chiefs sat down. They were among the first to arrive. And of course, members of the state government also there. And there was a lot of people flooding in, a lot of somberness, a lot of heartbreak and anguish, but also a lot of pride too. When you're speaking to the people sitting down, waiting for the ceremony to begin, everyone was so proud that they were witnessing history, essentially. A king who lived to be almost a century, who spent more than 65 years on the throne. This is something that just doesn't happen every day, essentially. So you can just see this small section at the burial site of how many people were there. And you can see the governor, Prince Dapo Abiodun, who spoke so impassioned when he gave his speech, when he gave his remarks after the internment. And I'd never heard him speak so emotionally before. He talked about how he wouldn't be the person he is were it not for the Awujale. He talked about how he found out about his departure, his journey on to meet his ancestors from a message from Olori Adetono, just to show that, you know, he himself was already in London focusing on what was happening with former President Muhammadu Buhari, and then immediately had to, you know, start arrangements to return to Nigeria, and then of course onwards to Ogun State, to Ijebu Ode itself. So he made it clear that he was very grateful to be able to be there in person, and that was the genuine and the general consensus across the multitude of people that we spoke to. And as you could see, and as you will see in our report, which we'll play later on during the morning show, there was a huge presence. So you had, of course, as you saw, Aliko Dangote was there. You had former Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, many members of the federal government. You did have, of course, the delegation who were representing President Tinubu there as well, in terms of Bosun Tijani and also Minister Adeboyega. His name always runs away from me, but just a huge showing in terms of the people who were there. And then, of course, there's a lot of traditional rulers there too. You will also see in the report, but also in these pictures, the multitude of these beaded staffs. They're beautiful, you know, the sticks that, you know, signify that a king has arrived. And so when they would enter into the ground, you can see them in the sky there, going ahead of the hearse that was carrying Awujale's body. But you can see just how beautifully they're decorated, and it was quite emotional to see them all stood in the lawn as you first enter, just again highlighting and underscoring the importance of culture, the richness of culture across Yoruba land, across Ijebu land too. And as I said, lots of state governors were there. You heard what Babajide Sanwo-Olu of Lagos had to say. He talked about, for the Ijebu people specifically, that this must be a huge loss. He talks about the vacuum that is now created in the aftermath of Awujale's passing. And again, another thing that we heard over and over again is that whatever happens in the future, now focus is going to be shifted on essentially the kingmakers putting together this succession plan. And there is a succession plan. And they want to make sure that this entire process is above board and it's peaceful. We don't want a situation where a declaration is made and the people revolt against it. And we have been seeing tenets of that in the lead up to this. So if we cast our minds back to when the dearly departed Shumomi Balogun died, it was actually the announcement of his replacement that came before he was even buried that kind of really ruffled a lot of feathers and upset a lot of people. So I think that there is definitely an effort to make sure that that doesn't happen again. That while you're bringing in a new leadership, the legacy of the one before it isn't disrespected in any way. And I think that that is also something that you heard many times as well. In order to respect the Awujale as he makes his way on to his forefathers, we have to make sure that we accept peacefully the leadership that comes from the next Awujale, which will emerge from the Fusegunwa political family. So yes, it was an honor to be there. As you know, this is my hometown, quite literally my hometown. You can walk to my nan's house from where we were yesterday. And as ever, I'm always proud to be an Ijebu girl. Extra proud yesterday and always.
I mean, always a proud moment. I mean, so by extraction, I'm Ijebu. I'm from Ijebu, Odogbolu. And one thing about, Ijebu Ode, and there are other Ijebu parts as Ijebu Gbo, it's not far from Ijebu Ode, and the fact that, Awujale come from a long line of impact makers. I mean, if you go back historically, one about the first Awujale is of Banta, and we all know the role of Banta played, being a liberal, a hero, somebody that stood for his people. And definitely, we are known for trading routes. So a lot of the British came to us then because most of the river tributaries were across Ijebu land, and the British will trade through there. So we had agreements up to the late 1800s where we said we cannot continue with this thing the British does, and we insisted to assert ourselves more. But the British went ahead to fight us in something called the Magbon Wars, where they decimated our land, and that also snowballed into, the reign of colonialism, because around the 1900s, the Royal Niger Company had ceded to the British government, and by 1906, they had done the first amalgamation where they brought the Lagos colony to other parts of the Southwest, and pretty much because they had conquered these territories through the war. And by 1914, they had done their job because they had brought in Lugard, that had mastered the art of terror. And they went ahead and he conquered also most parts of the north with the Maxim gun. And by 1914, they had coupled all of us together in what is known to be Nigeria today. But the Ijebu people always did stand tall. And something very symbolic about Awujale, because it's about that person that has a crisscross between the colonial days and now. He saw the potential of what Nigeria should be when he got in there at the age of 26, because Nigeria was just transiting out of the colonial government, where he was made king. And he was part of the very first process. Then we used to have something called like a chamber of chiefs, where the chief also had input, in political governance and advisory role and things like that. In fact, at a very tender age, he was put up to be elected, for that position that Leo was given to Adesoji Aderemi. So he's a man that saw the evolution of Nigeria, and he always stood tall. A lot of things not documented, where he's back and forth with a couple of governors, of Ogun State, then where he stood tall. He wrote it in his autobiography, where he stood tall, and he said, you have no rights to be able to do it. Awujale too went through this debacle that politicians do today, that they think they can wake up from somewhere and remove a governor. The governors think they can remove a king. But he stood tall at that point in time. He's known to, have that resolute force of nature, and to also encourage people of Ijebu extraction that do well to be able to thrive. So he was welcoming to all. Maybe you are from Ijebu Ayekwe, and I think over the 16, 17 Ijebu towns or more that we have, he welcomed everybody. Awujale's home was home to everybody. Like I say, human beings have their faults. I mean, there are people that they will say, no. I'm not on Awujale's side on this. There are many things he did. Take, for instance, quickly, what a lot of people will say, why did he never forgive his brother? He had this open fight with his brother till the end, which was even documented in his book that Dr. Bati talked about. I mean, people will say that. But, like I keep saying, when it comes to that time where people will, talk about you when you're gone, there will be days too that people will talk about me when I'm gone, and they will say all sorts of things. At least let the things they will say negatively be things out of sentiment that are not founded in facts. That's just all we say. One thing he also did was he also tried as much as possible to establish the traditional institution in such a way that it can be respected. See, there are many kings that are smoking in their hemps. We see them. We know stories.
I haven't seen them.
Of kings beating their wives.
Okay.
Allegations of kings smoking in their hemp. We know these things, Femi. But Awujale was above board. He was a king that respected himself. He didn't kowtow to anybody. So if you respect yourself, People will respect your return. That's why we were saying at a very short notice, people did turn out. Former Vice President Shibaju, everybody was there. Why? Because he was a king that respected himself. There are other kings, but some of them, they lack the level of respect. A lot of people will also fault him. Oh, mistakes made, as in the case you just pointed out. The case of Shubomi Balogun and, giving the position quickly and all of that. But when you also look at that, they have a point. Oh, things should have been done properly, the towering figure, because that position is not just a small position. No. So these are some of the things people will say against him. But at this point in time, I think it should be said that the greatest legacy for Awujale will be a peaceful transition process. So this is a clarion call to the Fashionable House, because even prior to this time, we hear there are people that have declared interest in that house. The Secretary of the House has that. So we'll see the declaration of interest. We'll see how the process goes. Yeah. And hopefully it doesn't get entangled in long-winded litigation. I mean, we've seen many Obaship that ended in very long-winded litigation. And that's why I really pay respect, to the Ibadan people. And maybe the Ibadan people learned from their historical past, because Ibadan, which comes from the original word Ibadan, was a garrison town. And that's why you have the Balogun line and the Otun line. So they've been able to balance the succession out in such a way that there's amicable, resolution. But prior to that time, the regent will be the Ogbeni Oja, so Olorogun Sani Kuku, who also comes from a very prestigious Kuku family, of Ijebu. They've done a lot, Kuku was also instrumental to bring in the mass movement of Islam to Ijebu. Another thing I'd like to talk about is, yes, this was one of the first real implementation of those chieftaincy laws of 2021 that says that kings have a right to be buried, to choose how they're going to be buried.
Correct.
Because I did hear a reportage about the Oshogbo people coming in there and all of that, and they were repelled. And that was that law getting, into use. I know some lawyers that were fighting tooth and nail in the court as regards enforcing that law. And his burial has been done. We'll see what will continue. And I know a befitting tribute will be paid to him also at the next Ojude Oba festival when we have it next year. So God rest his soul. But also, like I said, for President Muhammadu Buhari, let's do good when we are alive, so that what people will say after us, there's no how people will also say things after us when we are gone.
Absolutely. I think for me, the greatest takeaway is when a king, especially our traditional kings that we have, are custodians of culture, not just custodians of culture, also ambassadors of that culture and custodians of their people. Because when you read all of the accolades of the late king, you hear so many stories about his philanthropy. You hear so many stories about how accessible he was to his people, how he was always ready to be helpful, whether it be at the highest level of leadership or just on a community level. And that's what leadership is, and that's what it imbibes. And I think as much as it's sad to see him go to his final resting place, I think it's a celebration, Rufai, like you said, that he got to see that Ojude Oba. The last one is arguably one of the biggest that has happened. And the message went out to the world. And the world is asking, what's his Ijebu land? What happens there? Who are the people there? And that is the most powerful legacy that a king can leave behind. If you look at kings from all around the world, and when they speak about their empires, you speak of the Roman Empire. And so now he's put Ijebuland on the map, and we hope for a peaceful transition. And we hope that in the next phase of the ruling of Ijebuland, that we can continue to see the message of the Ijebu people going to the world, the growth, prosperity, and development of Ijebuland. And may peace continue to reign.